identified yourself as a firefighter.
Correct.
To whom did you identify yourself?
To Officer Tao, controlling the scene. I spoke loudly enough that I would think that the other three officers would have been able to hear me throughout the event.
We know you weren't, well, let me ask you this way. How did Officer Tao respond?
He said something along the lines of, if you really are a Minneapolis firefighter, you would know better than to get involved.
What did you think of that?
First, I was worried that he wasn't going to believe me and not let me help. And I also, that's not right. I mean, that's exactly what I should have done. There was no medical assistance on scene, and I got there and I could have given medical assistance. That's exactly what I should have done.
So based on your training and experience and what you had seen, what did you want to do for this person on the ground?
Had they let me into the scene, I already had decided what his level of consciousness was, so I would have requested additional help. I would have wanted someone to call 911 for the paramedics and fire to come. I would have asked someone to run to the gas station and look for an AED, and I would have checked his airway. I would have been worried about a spinal cord injury because he had so much weight on his neck. I would have opened his airway to check if there were any obstructions, and I would have checked for a pulse. And when I didn't find a pulse, if that was the case, I would have started compressions, and I didn't have my bed bag, so I would have continued compressions. We don't give mouth to mouth anymore. So I would have continued compressions at a rate of 100 a minute until help arrived.
And by compressions, what do you mean?
I would have put my hands, stacked my hands and pressed his chest.
Chest compressions.
Chest compressions,
yep.
Correct, yeah.
And what's the point of doing chest compressions?
Pumping the blood for somebody that's not doing that themselves, trying to get a pulse back.
And were you able to do that, any of those steps?
No, sir.
Why weren't you able to do any of that?
Because the officers didn't let me in to the scene. I also offered, in my memory, I offered to walk them through it, or told them, if he doesn't have a pulse, you need to start compressions, and that wasn't done either.
And so are these things that you wanted to do?
It's what I would have done for anybody.
When you couldn't do that, how did that make you feel?
Totally distressed.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
Ms. Hanson, as I told you, we can take our time, so feel free to just take a minute. And if you need a drink of water, go ahead.
Okay.
While you were there, were there other people around you on the sidewalk?
Yes.
And were they saying things to the officers as well?
Yes.
And do you remember what kinds of things they were saying?
No, I was pretty focused on trying to get the officers to let me help.
And how were you doing that, trying to get the officers to focus on you and get help?
I think, in my memory, I tried different tactics of calm and reasoning. I tried to be assertive. I pled and was desperate.
Did you also at some point start raising your voice?
Yes, sir.
And maybe used some foul language even?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Because I was desperate to help, and I wasn't getting what I needed to do.